Esther Rantzen is probably the most famous female face that British television has ever seen. She's been at the centre of campaigning and crusading on behalf of the British public for more than 4 decades.
How?
I have never looked at the chaotic scramble of my life.
I've just been arrested for handing out bat stew.
She's really been through the ringer of fame and celebrity and fortune. She's a tough cookie. And although she sees herself as the Maggie Thatcher of TV, I'm going to get into the real Esther.
I think Piers is going to talk about all the skeletons in my cupboard, and I have an enormous cupboard.
Now, Esther Rantzen, should I be worried in this interview? I mean, you're such a well-known, as somebody put it, Esther's a real ball breaker. She's going to break your balls. Now, I've never had that experience, but should I be worried?
Look, I am a great admirer of the male form. I'm not going to break any part of their anatomy.
Let's talk about your trademark. You have probably the most famous teeth in British history on television. When was it you realised that your teeth could be an asset in terms of a TV personality?
Never.
Really?
Never.
Do you still feel that now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For one thing, sitting where I'm sitting, I can't see them. You know, I use them from time to time, but I had no idea until I started to appear on television there was anything odd about them.
And was there a moment when you read a review or something and saw...
Absolutely. Toothy Esther Rantzen, you know how newspapers label you. Now I'm veteran Esther Rantzen, which I don't like any more than I like toothy, but I'm always toothy. And there were moments like we had an item on That's Life with 2 horses. Can I say I resent that laugh? But it was awkward sitting between them, and it was like a sort of tooth competition.
Now, you've been on British television for over 40 years. So I'm going to have to ask you a question I don't like to ask ladies, but I think people might be surprised. How old are you now?
I am, Piers, 72.
Wow.
Look, that is terribly kind of you, but it makes me feel terribly old. If I'd said 102, yes, thank you, I would have taken your applause, but...
How did you celebrate your 58th birthday?
My 58th birthday...
Do you want me to remind you?
You're going to?
You danced naked in your garden.
Can I point out that I was wearing this necklace?
And a hat.
And a hat.
Why did you feel the sudden burning need to go and dance naked in your garden?
I like being naked. I am at heart a naturist. I like all that. It's fun. It feels good.
When you're running naked,
Yes.
what does it feel like? Is there a technique to the running when you have to throw your arms wide open, or...?
Do you want to see how I run?
Yes.
OK.
Yes, you are going to remain fully clothed, right, Esther?
Fully clothed. Now, the trouble is, you see, I'm not terribly well coordinated.
Right.
So most people, I think, when they run, they sort of run at least vaguely with everything in the right direction. But when I'm really putting on the speed, the legs take slightly. This is going to be a problem. Please, studio team, forgive me, but once I had a talk show, and I had stairs like this, and the show always began... How do you do? The show... Forgive me, Piers. The show always began with me having to come down these stairs. And the trouble is that when I go downstairs... The director used to go by me, and I had a guest called Danny LaRue, who, as you know, was a very elegant man who spent most of his working life in ladies' clothes. And I said, Danny, you've got to help me with this. So he said, OK. So he taught me that what you do is you sort of go down sideways, like this. So now when I go downstairs like a man in drag.
Esther, let's take a look at how you became one of the most famous faces in British television history.
I've just been arrested for handing out bat stew.
Esther Rantzen, the queen of consumer TV.
Esther is a one-off in British broadcasting.
In your own time. How?
She brought us Britain's fruitiest veg.
She was obsessed by rude vegetables.
An excited tomato.
And the nation's wackiest pets. And, of course, TV's most famous set of choppers.
One member of the public wrote a letter and instead of putting an address or a postcode, just drew a picture of her teeth.
And the post office knew exactly who it was for.
I can't give you anything but love, baby.
Since her screen debut in 1968, Esther's hosted more than 1,000 TV shows.
Hello, welcome to Hearts of Gold.
Please,
Please don't shout. You're French. The French are courteous.
Now they've locked it.
I think Mum has the gift of longevity.
Goodness me.
She's also a pioneering campaigner.
Esther has been the most amazing consumer champion.
One of the gases this heater can produce is carbon monoxide, and that's lethal.
She didn't just entertain and inform, she got results.
One of her greatest results was founding a groundbreaking children's charity.
A national helpline for children in trouble or danger.
And she even made a bid for Parliament.
I care about politics. I care about our democracy.
But for 21 years and more than 400 episodes, Esther's best remembered as the host of That's Life.
Sunday night, 9:25, and the music starts, and you know that the majority of the country are sat in front of the TV.
Every week, Esther was on the street asking the great British public outrageous questions.
Hard or soft, if it's a matter of choice. How do you know that men are all alike?
Well, I've seen a few.
At its peak in the 80s, That's Life topped the TV charts with a weekly audience of 22 million viewers.
1 in 3 people in the UK were watching my mum on this show.
The key to the show's success was its variety.
You had a smile on your face 1 minute, and the next minute you were looking at something serious.
There's going to be a campaign to launch these.
Esther used her status as the consumer's champion to pioneer change.
She tackled con men.
As a mother, I mind about your perception of humanity as a series of potential victims.
And she campaigned on so many issues, and as a result got so many things changed or improved.
Playground surfaces changed because she did an item on That's Life about it.
That's the difference between the safe surfaces and concrete.
Esther's campaigns were even credited with a series of changes in the law, including compulsory rear seatbelts in cars.
Esther showed what could happen if your child was in the back of a car in an accident not wearing a seatbelt.
The impact hurls him straight through the car and out through the windscreen.
Esther had the power to pick up the phone, and she would have government ministers on the phone within seconds.
And by the late 80s, Esther's influence and success meant her role in British life was more than just as a presenter.
You would think in those days of Esther in the same bracket as politicians.
It used to be said in the 80s that the 3 most important women in the country were the Queen, Margaret Thatcher, Esther Rantzen, and not necessarily in that order.
You became one of the most powerful women on television, in fact, one of the most powerful people, period, but it was particularly so for women then who were not getting the kind of big jobs, if you like, of the men. You eventually offered the job of controller at BBC One, which would have made you the first ever female controller, but you turned it down. Why was that?
I did talk to Desi about it, my late husband, and he said, I don't think you would enjoy it, because although it's the exercise of power, what you actually enjoy doing is meeting the people involved in situations, talking to them about their lives, being able to do something about it. You actually like getting your hands on the story. So I went to see lovely Bill Cotton, who'd made me the offer, with 2 letters in my handbag. And one said, thank you so much, I'd love to go for it. And the other said, thank you so much, I'm so sorry. And until I opened my handbag, I didn't know...
Really?
I did not know which one I was going to take out. And I took out the one that said, I'm so sorry.
Did you ever regret that?
Yes, absolutely. To this day, there's a bit of me that says, I wimped out, I should have done it. As it happened, that very series, which I would not have done had I taken the job, we investigated a boys' school which was owned by a multimillionaire paedophile, and as a result of investigating it, he went to jail and so did several of his teachers. So a bit of me says that wouldn't have happened because That's Life would not have continued.
Well, That's Life at its peak was watched by 22 million viewers, over a third of the British population. That's Life was like an integral part of the family institution in this country, wasn't it?
Yes. People still talk to me about that, particularly people who were children during those years of That's Life, and who say it was the only programme they were allowed to sit up and watch on a Sunday night. It was an event. And it was a bit rude, bit mischievous.
Well, I'm coming to that, because you had this obsession with rude fruit and vegetables.
I blame the viewers. It's a fridge full of disgraceful parsnips and turnips and things.
Huge parsnips.
Piers, it really isn't about size.
You're also responsible for showing off the skills of the country's most talented pets.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about Prince. Do you remember him? He was a dog who could say sausages.
I will never forget Prince. Everywhere I went, people would shout at me across crowded supermarkets, busy streets, sausages. And I feel, on Prince's behalf, I should say, that not only did he say sausages, but he also said Elvis. And he also said Jersey. And on one occasion he said Esther.
He never said Esther.
Once.
He was just saying... You were a student at Oxford University at the beginning of the swinging 60s. Did you swing, Esther?
Children, block your ears.
Let's go back to where it all started. You were born in June 1940. Family came from London, but had moved out to Hertfordshire because of the war. Tell me about your parents, Harry and Catherine.
Oh, bless their hearts. Well, my father, Harry H.B. Rantzen, was, I think, the cleverest man I have ever met. He was a scientist, brilliantly clever. My mum, also very bright, was anarchic, eccentric, mischievous, wicked. They were a wonderful pair. And my sister and I were their priority.
Priscilla was your sister?
Priscilla.
Now, you and your family had a nickname for Priscilla for a long time, until the penny dropped. It may not be entirely appropriate. What did you call her?
Now, what you need to understand, Piers...
Just spit it out.
...is that we were, and I still am...
What did you call Priscilla?
Incredibly respectable.
Esther, her name was Priscilla, and you called her...
Prick.
Why would you call your sister Prick?
Because she spelled P-R-I-S-C-I-L-L-A. So you remember that on the C in the middle. And the thing was that we were so respectable. We'd never heard the F word. We never knew it had another meaning.
But you'd all go out for lunch and go, hey, Prick, can you pass the salt?
Absolutely. Yes, I feel...
How respectable is that?
But she is known as Scylla. Scylla is how she is now known.
But when did that change? Because it wasn't it when you were at university?
Yes. My parents were coming to visit me at university, and I said, Mother, we have to go for a drive, just you and me. And I said, right, Mum, this is tough news for the whole family, but I feel I should tell you what prick means. And I told her, and there was a horrible silence for about 10 miles, and then she said, Esther, you have the most disgusting imagination.
You became one of the most successful women in television, but as it turned out, things weren't going to be as easy as you may have hoped. Esther was born in Hertfordshire in 1940 to Mum Catherine and Dad Harry, a pioneer TV engineer.
The fact that his expertise was in the science around television obviously influenced her.
I think Mum was destined to be a performer.
Esther studied at Oxford University and then set her heart on a career in broadcasting. But her first job wasn't quite what she had in mind.
Esther began in broadcasting making sound effects for BBC radio plays.
It was she who slammed the door when one of the archers leaves the room, or you do the horse's hooves.
In 1966, Esther left sound effects to become a TV researcher. But before long, she found herself in front of the cameras.
Esther, I don't think, ever set out to be a television presenter.
She was a researcher, and the programme Braden's Week put their researchers on camera.
Well, he said that he went to Mr. Lucas and offered to pay him the cost of putting a wiggle in his rose.
There she was, suddenly, this young girl, all teeth, short hair, on telly.
As Esther turned 30, her TV presenting career took off.
If you think Michael Caine's movements are puzzling, you should try Mr. Nichols and his map. You are watching That's Life.
Do you like to actually set the explosion off?
Oh, I'd love to.
Off-screen, Esther had begun dating her boss at the BBC, Desmond Wilcox.
Desmond was the most fantastic man.
He was completely charismatic.
Esther had fallen madly in love.
She and Desmond were twin souls, absolutely made for each other.
Once that relationship started, there was no stopping it.
Esther and Desmond's relationship blossomed, but there was a snag.
Of course, he was married at the time to Patsy, and that didn't help.
Patsy had been married to Desmond for 14 years, and they had 3 children, and she was a friend of Esther's.
Esther was very fond of Patsy, and Esther was also, you know, becoming very fond of Desmond. It was a very difficult situation.
Esther's affair with Desmond continued for 8 years, while he still lived with Patsy and his family.
Mum was head over heels in love with my father.
I know that she didn't want to be responsible for the breakdown of Desmond and Patsy's marriage.
In 1975, Desmond finally left Patsy, then married Esther, and they had 3 children of their own.
The press, I think, thought that Esther was the outside woman who'd come and stolen Desmond Wilcox from his wife.
Naturally, Patsy was very bitter about it.
If Mum could have chosen not to love Dad, I'm sure she would have done. It was so painful for her.
Despite how hard she tried and how hard she tried not to hurt people, people were hurt.
Is it hard to hear everybody talking about it in that way?
Oh, I think what they said was right. It was disastrous, really. From the point of view of Patsy and the 3 children, it was disastrous. And if I could have not fallen in love with Desmond, and I tried not to, and we both tried not to, those 8 years, we tried to separate, we tried not to get together. But the fact was that he dazzled me when we first met. He was compassionate, humorous, immensely talented. He was, above all, loving. He loved his family, his whole family. He didn't want to cause any pain either. So that when I say I deeply regret what happened, I cannot regret the marriage that we had together and the family we had together, because we adored each other.
You said in your autobiography that you hated lying to Patsy. She was
Yes.
a friend of yours.
Yes.
And you felt terribly guilty. You'd been to their marital home, you'd met Desmond and Patsy's children and so on.
Yeah.
That whole 8-year period must have been almost surreal looking back on it.
It was really painful, and I don't want to sound hypocritical, because we really did make efforts not to see each other. When he left home, we agreed that he would not come and live with me. He would go and live on his own to see if they could put their marriage together again. And, of course, things weren't made better by the fact that I was working in the same television department as Patsy for a lot of the time, so she couldn't escape me. It was grim, really. And I'm afraid when marriages break, you know, a lot of people get hurt. I don't know if you believe in soulmates. Do you believe in soulmates?
Yeah.
Well, I think Desmond and I, his last words to me were, "I adore you." I was sitting on his deathbed. I will take those words with me to the grave. I said to my son last night, If God gave me the choice between 10 more years of life and 10 more minutes... If God would give me a choice between 10 more years of my life or 10 more minutes with Desi, I would pick those 10 minutes.
That's an amazing thing to say. Did Patsy ever forgive you?
Forgive him?
Well, you, actually.
Me, no. Him, yes.
In 1977, you became pregnant, and the media found out about your relationship with Desmond, and everything blew up, having been this long, long secret, 8 years and more.
I blew up a bit. I was the biggest pregnant lady you ever saw. Enormous woman I was.
But that moment that it all became public...
Yes.
Was it, in a funny way, a release? Or was it horrific?
Bit of both, really. You didn't know what people were thinking when you walked down the street. I mean, I didn't know if they were going to throw things at me or talk to me about a talking dog or something. I didn't know. What was it? I was thinking the other day, my oldest daughter, when she was about 5 or 6, I was sitting in the bathroom, and she came in and she said, "Mum, when you got married," because there were pictures of the wedding, "why weren't you wearing a white dress?" So I thought, well... So I told her, see. So then there was the sound of Desmond's key in the lock. And I said, "Why did you ask Daddy the same question?" So she ran down the stairs and she came back. And I said, "What did Daddy say?" And she said, well, he said there were 2 reasons. One was blue is your favourite colour, and the other reason he'd tell me when I was 18.
Now, you were a student at Oxford University at the beginning of the swinging 60s. Did you swing, Esther?
Can you define your terms, Mr. Morgan?
I'd rather you define them.
No, you tell me what you think swinging is.
Know, sex, drugs, rock and roll. Let's go through the list.
All right.
Drugs?
Nah.
Rock and roll?
I never liked Elvis. Isn't that a terrible thing to admit? Love the Beatles. So, yeah, next.
Sex.
Children, block your ears. I was a virgin until the age of 23. I was a virgin at university.
Weren't you in Melvin Bragg's bed at one stage?
I was in Melvin Bragg's
you were at university together?
Bed, yeah, absolutely.
Would you like to elaborate on how you got to be in Melvin Bragg's bed?
No, I like that idea, Lord Bragg. I was in Lord Bragg's. The truth is, he wasn't in it.
Damn it! But you were at this all-female college, Somerville, and the men were pretty attracted to you. The phrase bees around a honeypot has been used.
I'm amazed, because I never thought of myself as sexy. In fact, Desi always used to make me laugh with his insults, and he once told me that I had all the sexual allure of a rotting log. And that was roughly how I thought of myself, so I certainly never thought I was alluring in any way.
Well, you may have been a rotting log to some, but you weren't to a young tour guide in Greece in 1963 who, I believe, was the lucky recipient who decided you would no longer have your virginity. Let's put it that way.
I have no memory of anything. Tell me more.
Well, I think you do, because you revealed all this when you appeared on I'm a Celebrity.
I couldn't have. Did I?
Yes. Your memory was extremely good of this incident, and you revealed it in graphic detail to the nation.
I was lying. I was out of my mind with hunger and fear. I was thinking of someone else. Yes, I remember it well.
Who was this guy? Do you remember him?
Oh, of course I do. He was a doctor.
Do you remember his name?
No. I remember Greek for I love you.
What is it?
Sagapou.
Did you stay in touch with him? No. But you went home a woman.
Now, here is the news, Piers. Women aren't only the result of an act with a man. It doesn't take necessarily a man to turn...
Well, I was going to come to the women question in a minute.
He grabbed my chin and turned my head and plonked a kiss on my lips.
Wow.
wrong.
Now, Esther, you're one of the most successful women in television ever. When you started in TV, the ratio of men to women in senior positions was about 10 to 1. So you really did it the hard way in a business that was pretty misogynist, wasn't it, for a long, long time?
Absolutely it was, certainly. On screen and behind the screen. There were no women on Panorama at all, not as reporters, not as producers, nothing. And the BBC bosses at that stage said that women couldn't read the news because if it came to a tragic story, they'd burst into tears. And, you know, it was, as you say, misogynist times.
Are you amazed at how far and how fast things have changed?
Yes, I love the fact that women are so well represented in broadcasting at every level.
Still, most of the top jobs in television are men.
And I would like simply to say, and I blame men for these decisions, but actually I'm not sure I do.
Well, you said yourself that women don't always make the best bosses.
Women don't always make the best bosses. Some women feel that they've had it so hard themselves, that their own upward career has been so difficult, that they're not going to make it any easier for any younger women.
Esther, as you entered your 40s, you were a mum and you were one of the best-known faces on British TV. By the early 1980s, Esther was happily married to her husband, Desmond.
Mum and Dad meant everything to each other.
We talk at night about the things we haven't had time to talk about during the day, like, are we both in for supper tomorrow night, and if so, is it fish and chips or Chinese?
They were just very much in love and very funny with each other and very sweet.
Oh, my God!
And in 1986, with That's Life still topping the ratings, Esther's career was about to take a bold new step when a viewer wrote in to the programme.
Esther received a letter from a woman who'd been abused sexually as a child.
The very first letter that arrived moved Esther to tears.
It inspired her to tackle a subject on the programme which had never been explored before on primetime British television.
Esther launched a survey into child abuse on the programme.
It was a taboo subject. Esther, I think, was extremely courageous.
There was a huge number of responses. They went from floor to ceiling.
Esther's team featured some of the most moving stories on That's Life.
My father sexually abused me from the time I was 5. My worst memory is of the indescribable pain my father caused me when he raped me.
Esther had 3 small kids. She was a mum. She was so affected by what she was seeing.
It hurt her so much that this was happening and that no one was doing anything about it.
These children must be taken seriously. They must be helped.
So Esther took action. She aimed to launch the UK's first 24/7 helpline for children in trouble or danger.
It was incredibly difficult. She created from scratch a national charity.
People told her it couldn't be done.
Mum just became more and more of a kind of whirlwind of determination and action, and nothing was going to stop her.
Within just 6 months, Esther achieved her dream, and Childline was born.
We can announce the launch of a national helpline for children in trouble or danger.
Over the last quarter century, Childline has helped about 2.6 million children. Children have told us that, in fact, they wouldn't be alive now if it wasn't for Childline.
As Childline took off, That's Life finally came to an end in 1994, after 21 years.
It's my mascara falling all the way down.
It was a sad moment when it went, but also a glorious one to acknowledge what an incredible programme it had been.
For Esther, the end of the show meant more time for Desmond.
When That's Life ended, Mum and Dad had a dream that they would spend the next 20 years or so travelling the world together and enjoying life.
It was going to be wonderful for them.
But Desmond's health was becoming a worry for the family.
My father had had heart disease for a very long time.
We all watched him like a hawk. Every time he was breathless, any slight exertion, we were just so worried about him.
6 months after their 20th wedding anniversary, Desmond collapsed at the family home.
When Becca found Dad, she was terrified.
He just said... I think he just said, just get Mum. And I went back to the room and she knew.
Desmond had suffered a massive heart attack. He survived, but 2 years later, aged 69, he was rushed to hospital again, and this time doctors couldn't save him.
I remember him saying, there is a white light, and looking up, and my mum read him a prayer, and he told her how much he loved her.
They were soulmates, and they were never more interested, more animated, more exuberant and happy than when they were together. And seeing Mum apart from Dad, it's really hard.
Those last few days, weeks that you had with Desmond, did you realise he was probably going to die?
No, I didn't. I knew he was getting breathless and tired, and that he was on a cocktail of pills to try and put things right. But I must have been living in a fool's paradise, because I just didn't realise that when in 1986, he had his bypass, it was a symptom of coronary heart disease, which doesn't go away. And so it meant that we had limited time together.
Your children clearly hoped you were going to have 20 years or more to enjoy this great freedom you now were going to both have, which you never really got to enjoy. Is that one of your great regrets?
Yes. I find now that the most difficult times are the happy times. You know, if I go somewhere new and maybe there's a bay with little ships bobbing in the water and the sun going down, those were the things that he took a real delight in. He always dreamed that he would have his own little boat and go out sailing with me. And I find it really, really difficult. You know, the tough times, the painful times, you just put your head down and you cope. Someone said to my mum, "How's Esther coping?" And my mum said, "Esther copes because she has to cope." And that's what you do. But it's those lovely times that you want to share. When Becca got married, when Becca's baby was born, you know, Desi would so love to have been there.
Did you get the chance to say to him before he died all the things you would have liked to have said?
Not all the things. No. I mean, every night I used to hold him and tell him how important he was to us all, every night. The fact that he's still an inspiration to me, that I still measure the decisions I make by what he would say, the way he would say, "Go for it, Esther," because it was that sort of relationship. We empowered each other. We made each other better than we would have been without each other.
If you've gone through such an extraordinary, grand passion with somebody, do you fear that you could never have anything even remotely like it again? Do you want to have anything like it again?
It would be lovely to have a loving friend who I could share experiences like travel and so on with. I would love that. But there is a reality in what you say, and I don't know what I've got to give. You know, I hope that, you know, they always say never, don't they? And I believe in love. I think love is wonderful and inspiring and empowering, and it makes you achieve things you didn't think possible, and you walk. I can remember, you can remember, you probably are still in this state, Piers, where you walk with a spring in your step, and the sun shines brightly. It's a lovely place to be. And I don't know whether that is possible for me in the future. I just don't know.
Have you come close to finding somebody else, do you think? When you featured child abuse on That's Life in 1986, it was really the first time that subject had ever been exposed onto primetime television. How did you feel about that? You were pushing so many boundaries. Did you feel it was a huge gamble? Did you feel utter conviction, or were you slightly nervous about it?
I think what had happened was that the letters we'd had from adults talking about the terrible experience of the abuse they'd suffered as children was so powerful that they demanded a voice.
In 2012, the Jimmy Savile scandal broke. Now, you have been a leading figure at the BBC for 4 decades or more. It must have been a pretty seismic shock for you to discover that right in the midst of your own company, there was this serial paedophile, and he was a huge television presenter. Tell me about that.
Well, back in the 70s, when I was a very young new researcher, somebody had told me a rumour that Savile liked young girls, and I remember hearing it, not taking it seriously. We'd heard rumours about the royal family, politicians, people appearing on television. You know how the rumours come and go about almost everyone in public life, and most of them are malicious and nearly all of them are untrue. He was an icon, knighted by the Prime Minister or the Queen, knighted by the Pope, you know, every honour you can imagine. And that was the edifice that he constructed. And we as viewers, we as crowds, helped him construct it. We went along with this mythology, understandably, because there was no evidence that we had heard up to that stage from anyone who'd been abused or had witnessed abuse. So when I took part in the ITV documentary Exposure, and when I heard those 5 women simply telling their story, it was like a dagger in my heart that we as a nation had allowed them, A, to suffer and then to be silenced for so many years. And I think that's what, in a way, we all felt, in a sense, as public.
This is not aimed at you, but you know that the criticism from outside the BBC is that somebody there must have known a lot more than they're letting on. Not saying you, but obviously because of your childline presence and all the stuff you were doing, people are saying, how could no one, not even Esther Rantzen or anybody, have spotted this guy, given that now he looks like to have been one of the worst serial paedophiles in the history of his country?
Certainly, as far as I was concerned, I had absolutely no evidence, and if I'd had any evidence, if anyone had told me anything that I could have acted upon, I would have acted upon it. Because that's what I do, day in, day out, still.
Are you angry that people would cast any aspersions?
I am very angry. I think protecting children from avoidable pain is the most important thing you can do. That's why I launched Childline in 1986. That's why I still work for them every day. It's so crucial, that work. We've got to help children. Child abuse is an attack on a child's soul, and we have to be there to support them.
Esther, amazingly, you're in your 8th decade, but you don't seem to be slowing down. In 2009, Esther was approaching 70 when she found a new ambition, inspired by a political crisis.
Esther was outraged by the MP's expenses scandal.
She hated the fact that there was cheating on the public expense.
I think what's been going on has been appalling and a disgrace.
She saw something that was going wrong, and obviously the thing to do is get in there and do something about it.
So Esther bid to become an MP herself in Luton South, one of the seats caught up in the scandal, and stood as an independent candidate at the 2010 general election.
This is a completely new experience to me, standing in front of you as a would-be politician. You don't happen to vote in Luton South, do you?
She loved meeting people, she loved learning new things.
Hello, how do you do? Unusually, for one of Mum's endeavours, this one didn't quite work out.
Esther Rantzen, 1,872.
Esther finished in 4th place.
It's a shame she didn't get elected. It might have made Parliament more entertaining.
Those closest to Esther knew her dream to be an MP was about more than just politics.
After being widowed, Mum needed to keep busy. It was a coping mechanism. She'd lost a huge part of her life.
Esther had remained single and lived alone since her husband Desmond had died 10 years earlier.
I think if you know Mum before Dad died and you knew Mum afterwards, you'd say they were two different people.
Mum has been lonely since Dad died.
I think it was quite brave of her to come out and admit publicly how lonely she felt.
You okay, Esther?
Listening to the girls, they were talking about the laughter and the companionship and things, and I had a partnership like theirs. You know, I had somebody. I miss him, obviously.
But then Esther saw a way to turn her troubles into something positive.
I think her own experiences of loneliness meant that she suddenly realised that other people must be feeling this too.
She got a lot of feedback, a lot of letters saying, I'm in your situation, I know exactly what you're going through.
Which is why, being Esther, she then has a new project to help older people come through these experiences and have a better quality of life.
Last November, Esther founded a new charity, the Silver Line, to provide support for isolated older people.
Silver Line takes the idea of Childline, but provides a lifeline to the elderly, to the lonely, and gives them somebody to talk to.
And with Esther's new project up and running, is it time now for her to find the one thing missing in her life?
It would be the perfect happy ending if she could find someone to live with for the rest of her life, get married to.
She's got a lot to give. Yes, yes. Let's marry her off.
It'd be lovely for me to see Mum being happy and being taken care of again.
I remember watching that meltdown on the I'm a Celebrity when you suddenly revealed really how you were really feeling. You seemed very lonely. It was very moving. Was it in some way cathartic to get it out on national television and have everyone scrutinise it?
What happened to me in the jungle were the girls were describing their relationships. And I was really happy for them. But my heart was saying, I know what that felt like, you know? I'd lived on my own for the first time in 71 years. I'd never lived alone before. And that meant opening the front door and the place was dark and there was no one there. And then I did what I always do in moments when I need therapy, and I rang a newspaper and they said, loneliness, good topic, write about it. And when I wrote about it, I was inundated with letters from people who'd been through the same thing. So I told the newspaper and they asked me to write a sequel to it. But in the interim, I had come up with the thought that maybe, just as Childline breaks through the stigma of abuse and enables children who have no other way of asking for help to ask for help, a helpline, and we call it the Silver Line, would do the same for older people.
Has it helped you deal with your loneliness setting up Silver Line?
At a working level, yes, that's terrific. I love it, and I've got a fabulous team. It's a wonderful new challenge.
But on a personal level, nothing's changed?
At the end of the day, I've got the key in the front door.
Have you been on any dates?
Yeah.
How do you find the experience?
Nothing changes. You think that those embarrassing moments that you had when you were 16 and 17, surely when you're 60 or 70, you know, they can't come back. You're too mature, you're too sophisticated. They do. I think my worst experience was at the end of a very nice evening with a charming man. And we were saying goodnight in my kitchen. And I proffered my cheek, and he grabbed my chin and turned my head and plonked a kiss on my lips.
Wow.
Wrong. Never do that. If she turns her head, that's fine. If she hasn't turned her head, that will never do.
How did you react?
Never saw him again.
What did you do to him when he did that?
Well, I actually, if truth be told, I ran round. You know how kitchens these days are sent to islands? I just ran round and round the island. And he sort of lumbered after me. It was ridiculous. I tell you, nothing changes. It was just like when I was 16 or 17. And you've seen the way I run, honestly.
Have you come close to finding somebody else, do you think?
Ask me again in a year's time.
So there is somebody? There's a flicker. Who is this flicker?
Well, he's a very clever, distinguished man.
Has it been going on long?
Nothing is going on, Piers. Nothing. No. Zilch.
Which is why you're talking about
Nothing.
it. Mm.
No, you did ask me the question. Unfortunately, I've got this terrible habit of thinking through the answer. Right, ask me the question again.
Is there somebody on the horizon that could possibly develop into something more serious?
No.
Esther Rantzen, that was your life.
Oh, my goodness me.
Thank you very much.
Next week, Piers will be joined by Lorraine Kelly. Tomorrow, Saturday Night Takeaway returns at 7, hosted by our favourite cheeky double act, Anton Deck. Then at 8:20, 4 more fellas will be hoping Paddy McGuinness can be their Cupid in Take Me Out. But next up, it's your ITV News.
Esther Rantzen is probably the most famous female face British television has ever seen. She's been at the centre of campaigning and crusading on behalf of the British public for more than 4 decades.
How? I have never looked at the chaotic scramble of my life.
I've just been arrested for handing out bat stew.
She's really been through the ringer of fame and celebrity and fortune. She's a tough cookie. And although she sees herself as the Maggie Thatcher of TV, I'm going to get into the real Esther.
I think Piers is going to talk about all the skeletons in my cupboard, and I have an enormous cupboard.
Now, Esther Rantzen, should I be worried in this interview? I mean, you're such a well-known, as somebody put it, Esther's a real ball breaker. She's going to break your balls. Now, I've never had that experience, but should I be worried?
Look, I am a great admirer of the male form. I'm not going to break any part of their anatomy.
Let's talk about your trademark. You have probably the most famous teeth in British history on television. When was it you realised that your teeth could be an asset in terms of a TV personality?
Never.
Really?
Never.
Do you still feel that now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For one thing, sitting where I'm sitting, I can't see them. You know, I use them from time to time, but I had no idea until I started to appear on television there was anything odd about them.
And was there a moment when you read a review or something and saw...
Absolutely. Toothy Esther Rantzen, you know how newspapers label you. Now I'm veteran Esther Rantzen, which I don't like any more than I like toothy, but I'm always toothy. And there were moments like we had an item on That's Life with 2 horses. Can I say I resent that laugh? But it was awkward sitting between them, and it was like a sort of tooth competition.
Now, you've been on British television for over 40 years. So I'm going to have to ask you a question I don't like to ask ladies, but I think people might be surprised. How old are you now?
I am, Piers, 72.
Wow.
That is terribly kind of you, but it makes me feel terribly old. If I'd said 102, yes, thank you, I would have taken your applause, but...
How did you celebrate your 58th birthday?
My 58th birthday?
Do you want me to remind you?
You're going to?
You danced naked in your garden.
Can I point out that I was wearing this necklace?
And a hat.
And a hat.
Why did you feel the sudden burning need to go and dance naked in your garden?
I like being naked. I am at heart a naturist. I like all that. It's fun. It feels good.
When you're running naked,
Yes.
what does it feel like? Is there a technique to the running when you have to throw your arms wide open, or...?
Do you want to see how I run?
Yes.
OK.
Yes, you are going to remain fully clothed, right, Esther?
Now, the trouble is, you see, I'm not terribly well coordinated.
Right.
So most people, I think, when they run, they sort of run at least vaguely with everything in the right direction. But when I'm really putting on the speed, the legs take slightly. Problem. Please, studio team, forgive me, but once I had a talk show and I had stairs like this, and the show always began, how do you do? The show, forgive me, Piers, the show always began with me having to come down these stairs. And the trouble is that when I go downstairs, director used to go by me, and I had a guest called Danny LaRue, who, as you know, was a very elegant man who spent most of his